Good morning, and welcome to the Brenda Perryman Show right here on TV 33, WHPR, Comcast 91 in Detroit, and all over the world, courtesy of the World Wide Web. And we have a great show for you this morning. My second guest is Mr. Robert Elms. He is the one, for those people who didn't know, who purchased the old Highland Park high school, community college building, and more. And we're going to talk about that and his plans or dreams and plans for that building, which I'm very much interested in. But my first guest is Sharon Madison, who is the director?
No, actually, I'm the chairperson.
Of the Wayne County, Detroit Wayne County Joint Building Authority,
Yes,
right?
That's correct.
Now, what is the Detroit Wayne County Building Authority?
Well, Brenda, first of all, I just want to thank you for having me here again on your show. It's always a pleasure to be with you. But the Detroit Wayne County Joint Building Authority is actually the operator and the entity, operating and maintenance entity for the Coleman A. Young Center, the municipal center for the city of Detroit and Wayne County courts.
We used to call it just City Hall, right?
That's right.
City Hall, and the spirit of Detroit looms large outside of it.
It does, it does. The Spirit of Detroit is a sculpture that was commissioned by the original building authority. First of all, the Detroit Wayne County Joint Building Authority is the oldest building authority in the state of Michigan, and we're very proud of the fact that we are recognized internationally for our stellar operations and maintenance of such a facility. But the original authority back in 1955 commissioned Marshall Fredericks, a world-renowned sculptor, to sculpt something that would represent the citizens of the city of Detroit, and hence that iconic Spirit of Detroit, which sits right in front of the Coleman A. Young Center, looms large, and it's its 60th birthday. So we're celebrating.
60th birthday, and there's so many great celebrations this year. Highland Park turned 100. And here's 60 years, because it seems like it's been there most of my life, and you can't miss it, ever.
Well, that's true. And, the whole vision for the Spirit, if you look at it, there's two hands, one that has a representation of the Spirit of God, and in the other hand has a family and represents the family. And so the Spirit of God through the family is what keeps Detroit hopeful, faithful, and continuing to prosper. And so we're engaging our entire community in our celebration, which is September 21st.
A week from today.
A week from today, from 12 to 2, right out in front of the Spirit. Where we will have a wonderful celebration. We're inviting everyone to come. We, for the first time, will have the inaugural Spirit of Detroit Band, and I want to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I want to know, who are these people?
Yes, well, one of the things last year, there are 3 commissioners on the authority. I'm the chair. I was preceded by the iconic Patricia Cole, who was there for 26 years. And so, those are big shoes to fill. But I chair, and there are 2 other commissioners, Tom Scott and Lou Jean Nelson. And so, Derek Saunders, who Tom Scott replaced when he passed away last year. The 3 of us decided that we were going to come up with criteria for the Spirit, because we're always being asked for jerseys. People know the Spirit by having these jerseys.
Right. These gigantic jerseys.
Gigantic jerseys. And, but this is a very, very important piece of art. And so the commissioners determined that we needed to have criteria, and we came up with 2 decisions. One is that we would not put any more jerseys on the Spirit unless it was a championship team. Not a runner-up, but a championship team.
Wow.
So when we get another championship team, there will be a jersey there.
Detroiters have been suffering for a while.
Right. So, so let's all root for that.
Yeah.
But the second thing is that, when we're looking at criteria for what does the Spirit of Detroit mean, we decided to ask the people. And so the first, so one of our first efforts is for the first time to have a competition for school children in the city of Detroit and in Wayne County, because those are our jurisdictions. And so we are will be launching the Spirit Show Your Spirit Detroit competition at our 21st of September celebration. And this will be, we have a curatorial team. We will be working with schools throughout the year to get students ready for the competition, which will take place next spring. But one of our curatorial members is Chris Collins, who's the executive director of the Detroit Jazz Festival. And so Chris has put together, from the alumni band of the Jazz Festival, all young Detroiters, the Spirit of Detroit band. So, so we'll be looking forward to hearing from them. And also the iconic Jessica Caremore, who will be doing one of her poems about Detroit.
Yes. In fact, in one of my poems, I use the Spirit of Detroit still stands.
Yes,
It's such a symbolic, sculpture. It's so symbolic. And so next week, Friday. From 12 noon to 2?
From 12 to 2.
12 noon to 2. So we just park and we just come and we watch the celebration. What will it entail?
Well, again, as I said before, we'll have refreshments.
Food.
We also, we have been notified that both of our senators will be present.
Good.
And congresspeople will be present, elected officials, of course. But the most important thing, I think, is to really hear from those people that are working on the program with the students for the year.
Absolutely.
So that we can show, so that we will always have the Spirit of Detroit defined by young people and citizens that live here. So
absolutely, because, it gives them a vested interest in the city, in the spirit. I believe when people have a vested interest in something, they tend to take care of it more, to cherish it more. And I think that with you all going into the schools, that is even better.
Yes, I really appreciate your saying that. And I think that the whole movement and the whole idea behind this was to really get people to be thinking about what is the spirit of Detroit? What is Detroit? And, going back to Marshall Frederick's, the spirit of God, the family. We're all one big family.
Absolutely.
So, so we're really excited. And in this program, I should add, so our curatorial team consists of Chris Collins. We have George Nambi and his daughter, Zebe. We have Eunice Moore, who is coordinating and organizing all of this for us, and we're very grateful to her. Tony Smith, who is the assistant principal at the School of Performing Arts, among others that are pulling together. We're involving the Detroit Public Library, all types of entities to really get young people engaged, and through them, their parents engaged in terms of what it is to be a Detroiter, what it is to be from this really magnificent place.
Absolutely, absolutely. So this is so exciting, this initiative. I can't wait to see how it turns out. I think it's going to be successful. A lot of times,
I know it's going to be successful.
Yeah, she knows.
Yeah.
I believe, because I believe in her. Because of her, I got the opportunity to open up for Sidney Poitier. Remember?
I do.
Yes, that was just a wonderful time, and my mother really, really still cherishes that.
Well, I knew you as a writer and a poet, and when I chaired, as you know, the Friends of African American Art, I was always trying to create unique experiences for everyone. And so, so that was a wonderful time for us all.
It was. I still have some pictures of that time. I have a beautiful picture of your outfit, too. So next week, a week from today, don't forget the 21st, 12 until 2, let's meet at the Spirit of Detroit downtown in front of the Coleman A. Young Municipal Building, right?
That's correct.
Right. And you'll see Sharon, you'll get that. You will... you have to go away from Detroit sometimes to appreciate Detroit. And I've written about that, how I couldn't wait. I wrote a poem on a plane about how I couldn't wait to fall on my knees and thank God for Detroit, because it's a place like no other.
That's true. That's true. And you know what, Brenda, I think that's one of the things that we have to remember. Oftentimes, I know there's a quote in the Bible. Jesus says, there's no respect from your own hometown. And I'm obviously not stating it exactly, but that's in essence what it meant. And I think people that come here from other places recognize the uniqueness of Detroit immediately. So we want Detroiters to recognize the uniqueness of Detroit.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for making it down here. It's such a pleasure. And be sure, be there or be square, I used to say.
Right.
Remember that?
That's right.
Spirit of Detroit, right downtown, and then walk over to the river walk after that.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Oh, my pleasure. Well, stay tuned for Mr. Robert Elms. He'll be on in just a moment. I am back. I have wanted to interview this man for so long, and he finally made it because, I have sentimental reasons also. Mr. Robert Elms, good
Hello.
morning.
Good morning. How are you?
Fine. You are the founder and director of Galapagos.
Galapagos Art Space.
Yeah, Galapagos.
Right.
Galapagos Art Space, right?
Yes, that's right.
And he is the person who purchased the Highland Park High School. It used to be high school. The whole Highland Park College complex between 2nd and 3rd, and some other buildings around it, right?
Yes, the Ferris School.
Ferris School.
Yeah, and then there's a little power plant on the corner of 3rd and Highland, which we love. It's a beautiful little building that we see as a key part of what we're working to do there.
Well, let's kind of go back to the beginning and learn a little about you.
Sure.
Now, you're not a native New Yorker. You're a native...
I'm Canadian. In fact, I'm from Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. And in fact, from a small town south of Vancouver, a little town called Crescent Beach, which nobody ever knows. But Vancouver is the big city.
Yeah, a lot of people make movies in Vancouver, too.
Yeah, it's become the Hollywood North.
I know. I know. Do they do it because it's cheaper?
That's originally it was the reason. Yeah, the Canadian dollar was less valuable than the American, and so it was cheaper all around to shoot there. And then the crews became so advanced and so well trained and so numerous that you could shoot many productions in the city all at once. So the cost advantage and then the training of the crews, and it really launched it, I think, as to a capital of filming.
Yeah, we used to be excited to go over to Canada because our dollars were worth more. What is the ratio now?
I think it's 84 cents, I think. I'm not sure, to be honest. I haven't gone back to Canada in so long. I know, isn't that odd?
So you went from Canada to
New York City when I was 22, and I was an artist, a sculptor.
Isn't it funny? We were talking about the spirit of Detroit, and it's a sculpture,
Right.
a great. Did you ever work on anything that big?
Nothing that big. No, nothing that big. Many smaller things, but that led to opening the venue, Galapagos Art Space, in Brooklyn, New York, in 1995, and we opened officially in 1998. But our function as a crossroads of an emerging artist neighborhood was to grow young artists from the emerged to the mid-career. So that, to us, meant from the beginning we would sort of sort out who we thought were going to be successful and who had good work.
Once you did sort that out, did you groom them?
Yeah, we did. So our goal was to grow them to the mid-career, when we would metaphorically wave goodbye and they would go off to the bigger venues in New York City, like Lincoln Center and Carnegie Hall, et cetera.
Right.
And we would teach them how to better produce themselves, how to promote themselves, how to kind of take care of the business end of what they were doing, and strategically look at building an audience and grow, because it's not taught in art school or in the performing arts how one is going to do that, right? You're just sort of taught to hone your skill, which is
Right.
obviously a critical component.
But not how to market your skills.
Exactly.
Not
and
how
so
you
there are
market.
many more opportunities for young artists to do that. So originally, you would have to sign with a label or work with a large venue that would in turn help you promote. But now you can take that into your own hands. And I think that empowers young artists to
It really
find
does.
success, and it's very important.
Well, what kind of arts did you have?
Pretty much across the board. So theater, dance, cinema, music, a lot of indie classical, science programming, TED Talks, painting, sculpture. It was really
Oh, wow.
across the board, reflecting a neighborhood that that had all of those inhabitants within it. And I think that's one reason we've been successful for a long time, is that we don't produce just one kind of work.
Right,
Right.
absolutely. Because I was wondering if you had like a conglomerate of things, of disciplines, I should say. That's what we say in the arts.
Right.
Disciplines.
Disciplines, yeah.
Right, absolutely. And of course, theater is my big deal. That's what I love. That's what. But with theater, especially with our musicals, we'd have the band,
Mhm.
the orchestra.
Yeah.
We'd also have artists. We'd also have dancers, and and actors, and so forth.
Yeah.
And technicians who learned how to develop the set, and so forth.
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
and we tried while I taught high school. We gave them a launching pad to go right into those kind of things
Yeah.
when they got to college, because so many parents are leery of their children going into the arts. Did you
Yes.
ever find that?
Yeah, parents can be nervous about that. They wonder if there's really a career there.
Right.
And it's a long shot, to be honest. It's a long shot. And that's why we think it's important to train young artists in promotion and producing, so that they're out there building an audience, while they
Right.
have the real vision to go about doing it. When you're equipped with those other components and really aware that you're part of an ecosystem, right? That there's
Right.
technicians and that there's fellow artists in different disciplines sharing information, sharing
Absolutely.
knowledge is critical to everyone's success. And then all of that within a community is bolstering a community's ability to communicate within its boundaries and within its people.
Absolutely.
And that's so critical. The arts then in schools and just playing a role in our communities is tremendously valuable for everyone involved.
So, how did you choose Highland Park
Highland Park
and Corktown?
Well, we originally bought a building in Corktown, and we chose this area, Detroit and Highland Park, for the reason that New York is far too expensive to incubate young artists, and the role that the city played for decades was to grow young artists within it, who would then go on to the larger venues, right? And that system worked very well, but it's now not functioning because the cities that would traditionally send young artists to New York, they would aggregate in Portland and Austin and Minneapolis and,
Right.
and things. And those that function of the young artists getting sort of restless in their regional capital and then going to New York City began to not function correctly because of the costs of arriving in New York.
Back in the 80s, I remember being in New York and in the 80s, and we have some pictures showing of the college and so forth, to be showing now. But it's a block-long building. But we'll talk about that in a second. But in New York, I remember I have friends who are professional actors, and they would act in church basements and all types of places, and you'd get an audience. Everybody was so hungry for the arts, it didn't matter. They clear out apartments, put all their furniture in someone else's apartments, have shows there, and so forth. It was just so great to hone your skills there. But as you said, I watched things get so expensive. An apartment much smaller than this space, much, much smaller. I had a friend, she had to move because, what do they call it when they change the city?
Gentrification.
Gentrification. This small space, I think that apartment couldn't have been 500 square feet, $125,000, and this was in the 80s.
Right.
And
Yeah. Right, and so when you tip artists from being able to work part-time and collaborate and work with each other in all those other hours that they're not working
Right.
part-time, then you move them into a full-time job, and you you take away their ability to really work on their art. So the best young artists we found aren't going to New York. They're staying in their regional cities, and they're trying to make a career happen in a smaller second city. And we think that the country benefits by having this national mixing chamber that New York was for so long. And if New York is unaffordable, then it has to be somewhere else.
Right.
And I think by definition, we're not all going to Portland and Austin. Those cities are interesting and have a regional character. But I think Detroit has an opportunity to be the mixing chamber of the young arts in the United States, because the young artists need the anonymity. They need the reinvention of going to a new place where they put their ideas in frankly, a competitive environment and learn their own skills because of that opportunity. And Detroit can be that. You know, the city is so vast. It's such a big footprint that the city doesn't need to grow vertically. And when it's successful, the market, the real estate market, can always produce another 3-story building here. And so,
Right.
like in New York, where it was expensive and you're in a built environment, you had to go up. And here, it doesn't have to be that way.
No, it doesn't. And there's so many, you know, so many renowned artists have come from Detroit, as you know, and this was the home of Motown and
Yes.
so forth. Wonderful Motown. It was the music of my life coming up. But arts can give a city a sense of pride.
Mhm.
And I think it was Richard, I can't think of his last name, but he wrote a book.
Oh, Florida. Richard
Florida. Yes, and
Yeah.
he said that the arts are going to be the thing that brings Detroit back.
Mhm. Yeah, and I agree with that. I think that the city is experiencing a lot of success, especially downtown and in Midtown. And it doesn't have to be any particular flavor, but the arts really, I think, give it you know, a sense of craft and a sense of open possibility that helps the city compete for young participants in the industries that'll matter most to the city, right? Into technology,
Absolutely.
design, all the things that drive Detroit, you know, that really add value and add growth to it, are based in the arts, right? So young, competitive young professionals want to be in a city that's affording them skill sharpening and opportunity to
Right.
grow outside of their career.
Right, right, absolutely. And the one thing about it that's so amazing is you watch these young people who are stepping out in the arts. They're less cautious than, say, I was back in the day. You know, my mother said when I decided to go into drama, she said, "You'll starve." I said, "Well, I'll teach it." You know, you try to get through. And luckily, I was able to do more than teach it and to take it out and do some things in New York and here outside of the schools. However, now I see more young people endeavoring to do that. And I see a change of attitude of some of the parents also. So they see it is a possibility to be successful. And that's why I want to get into the Highland Park complex that you have purchased. And I wanted to know your particular dreams for that.
Yeah, so it's a beautiful building. It's a really iconic and beautiful building that's played a large role in the community for so long. We bought it in 2014 from the school district. The building had been stripped of all the metals in it, so there was no copper, there was no
Really?
aluminum. Scrappers had gotten in
Oh,
and done that. And but the structure of the building is in good shape. And you know, we could look at it as the scrappers did some of the demo work. You know,
Yeah.
looking at it half full. We weren't going to run everything back to one electric meter, you know, so everything
Right.
has to be redone in any case. But it's a beautiful building, and our venue we want to build there. In Brooklyn, we based the venue on a 1,500 square foot lake, so we had a lake in the venue. And imagine if a tree fell on a lake and the trunk becomes the winding walkway and the branches
Yes.
go out to seating islands.
Yes.
And then we had islands on this lake with seating. Surrounded by an operatic mezzanine.
So you were thinking of doing something like that within that building?
Exactly. Yeah. So
Wow.
we'll recycle roof water, et cetera, to fill this lake, and you know it's only 6 inches of water. We use India ink in the water to create the opacity to sort of get an effect where, if you see a puddle after a storm and you look in the puddle, you can sometimes see the trees and the clouds and the sky.
Yes.
And it's the same idea. We're creating sort of an opacity and reflection on the top. So we're just using really a thin layer of water to do that. But we see it growing now to 10,000 square feet. as this environment. But we're only 250 seats. We're not a big venue, right? So we're growing artists from the emerged to the mid-career, and to us that means an audience of 40 or 50 when we engage them, up to an audience of 250. After that, they're going on to the bigger venues.
Oh, amazing. I mean, that's such a big building. How many square feet is that building?
302,000.
302,000 square feet.
Yeah, it's an incredible building. So then we think of our gallery, Galapagos Kunsthal, as being on the ground floor, and then partnered with other galleries in sort of an incubative entrepreneurial retail environment. So to us, that means if there was a young woman making dresses, she would then retail them out of the building and have a studio retail space. So I think our job in that building is to curate young entrepreneurial ideas into physical spots, right? So our venue,
Kind of like a tech town for the arts.
a tech town for the arts is a good analogy. In Brooklyn, we have the Brooklyn Navy Yard, which is a huge project which essentially is doing something similar, right? And they've been doing it for a long time and very well. But that's a little bit business to business. I think we're a little bit more of community to business, right? So getting people into the site, able to walk throughout it, find things that are interesting to them is our curatorial job, similar to what we do in the venue itself. And then they engage with the artists and the artisans that are in that environment that we'll build out at very, very low rents. So we want to be at half market rent for those young projects, and then grow them up and out into the community so that they take storefronts and project sites outside of where we are. Maybe they're with us for 2 years. You know?
Right, right. Now that would be the artist. It could be anywhere from the performing arts to the visual arts.
To a jewelry maker,
Right.
to a dressmaker,
Right.
et cetera. And then we have a very robust nonprofit fundraising component. We've done over 600 fundraising events for nonprofits and community activist groups in Brooklyn. And
Really?
that's
Oh,
a huge component.
By the way, if you want to call and ask any questions, you can call us at 313-868-0342, 868-0351, or 868-4336. So in Brooklyn, you all did that.
Yep. So we did everything from the largest cultural organizations in the city to the little dance company around the corner, you know, to the neighborhood community activists who were fundraising for the programs that they were working on. So that's an important component, you know, to use the space for fundraising and to do a no-cost to low-cost sliding scale of fee for that, so that we're fundraising with and for everyone. So we have the venue. The venue's an asset. It's been a beautiful award-winning venue, you know, with a lake. I mean, it's a great place to fundraise within. And that program is important to continue here because you really stitch a community through the arts and through it's, you know, fundraising for its activism.
Yes, yes. So will there be classes in there also?
We also do kids programming. Yeah,
Kids programming?
Kids programming, which I think we're going to get even better at. I have a 5-year-old now. And so I think once you're a parent, you probably are better at doing kids programming than when you weren't a parent. So.
Right. Well, yeah, probably so.
To some
Probably
degree.
so. Yeah, I think that. You know, you have your children in mind. How can they be a part of this? How can they take part? But what I was saying, like in the performing arts, will you have any? Will there be any training going on within that large space?
Well, we're thinking, you know, New York City has LaGuardia Performing Arts for the high school,
Yes.
high school for the performing arts.
Yes.
And there has to be a way to do something with the school board, I think, you know, to do some kind of programmatic work with them. You know, it's hard enough to fund schools in Highland Park and, you know, to add a burden of cost to them for the arts, I think is going to be difficult for at least a decade. I joined the school board, an advisory board for the school board, and recently, and it was an eye-opening experience. It really taught me about the tax base of Highland Park and how little tax base there is. And
It
therefore,
used to, when I first started teaching, it had a bigger tax base.
It did.
Because of Chrysler and
Yeah.
so forth. And it just seems like we had industries here.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was still here as Chrysler pulled out, and less resources. We had less resources
Mm-hmm.
financially.
Mhm.
But there is funding that could be available, right?
There is. So being on that advisory board, there's a lot of national money, right? Department of Education funding that can come into play. The only funding right now that's available is state funding. That state funding, I think, is $8,400 per pupil per year. But you have to do a charter school in order to utilize that money. Unless your tax base is higher per person or per student than that state money, you're forced to use the state money and to be a charter school. Charters aren't necessarily a bad idea, but there's no hope right now of a public school system that's funded by the city because the tax base isn't there. And because the Republicans did a nasty little trick of defunding cities and then doing Proposition A, which doesn't allow them to raise their taxes more than 3% per year. And so oddly, that's coming around to be an anti-gentrification tool, right? So if if a city can come up in value, but the city can't raise the taxes stay low. So there's got to be a way that we can put all this together. Everyone gets to stay in the game in Highland Park because you're not going to be property taxed out. And in cities like New York, you would be taxed out. So your neighborhood would go up in value, but nobody gives you a raise because your neighborhood went up in value.
Right, absolutely.
And so then you couldn't afford the new taxes, and you'd have to sell kind of at the end of stage one. In Highland Park, as the city goes up, and if you're a homeowner, you're going to be able to stay in as long as you want because your taxes can't go up more than 3%, and that's Proposition A that was approved. I think it was in the late 80s or the 90s. And that really means that there can be a lot of things built here. They're going to keep residents in the city and allow their houses to go up in value without their bills going up in cost.
Well, I think about the Woodward Corridor from downtown to 8 Mile. And I actually do believe that the Woodward Corridor in Highland Park will come up or is coming up.
It's going to, absolutely. So where you've mentioned specifically downtown, into Midtown, into North End, next stop is Highland Park.
Absolutely.
There's a lot of growth happening there, but it's not being reflected yet in the housing prices in Highland Park.
Really?
And if you're a Highland Parker, now is a great time to buy your house.
Absolutely.
We're not seeing the $150,000, the $200,000 house here. We're seeing them still below $50,000. I mean, that's amazing, but that's not going to last. New residents are going to move in, and that's an opportunity for the city because the reassessment to fundamentally change the tax base of any particular property is when it's sold. So a brand new reassessment happens when it's sold.
Well, we have a call on the line. Good morning.
Hello?
Hello?
Hello, this is Sydney.
Hi. Hey, Sydney, how are you?
Hey, I'm doing great, Miss Perryman. I'm just calling to thank Mr. Elms for allowing Parker Pride Alumni Association to utilize the building for the 100-year centennial celebration. Everyone enjoyed it. People had a chance to meet Mr. Elms, see him, see how he thinks. He gelled real well with everyone that showed up. We made a video. He's in it several times. Just a question. You sit on a lot of boards in Highland Park. What other boards did you sit on?
Well, an advisory board for the school board, and then I'm an advisory member on the Highland Park Chamber of Commerce.
Okay, with the advisory board with the school board, is that something, do you agree with trying to get the city their own school system back without it being all chartered?
Yes, I think this city needs a school system. I think it's critical. When the school system essentially fell apart here, there were 2,400 students in the district, and now only around 400 to 500 can be accounted for. That's just a shocking
it's
thing.
Funny.
They've gone off to Detroit and to other places, but nobody knows for
sure. Well, you don't blame them.
When Sydney went to the community high school, Highland Park Community High School, it was 2,000 people right in that school, 2,000 students, or a little over 2,000, because I was the sponsor of the first class that graduated out of that high school. And it was just so successful. And then years later, I saw the population. I couldn't believe it. It was so small.
Right, and now we're down to having no high school at all.
Well, the school had a, you know, the kids had a reason to go to school other than just living in the city. I mean, I had friends living in Detroit, couldn't wait to go to Highland Park to be in the band, be a part of the sports, the art. Miss Perryman was doing things with the art. I mean, we had things to offer. My sister is running for school board, Janet White. She's going under Janet White, and she is Parker to the day she dies. She's on the committee for Parker Pride, and she's going to try to do whatever she can to try to get this school system back where it was. Because, you know, there's a lot of people who want charter schools, pay to play, and stuff like that in our city. And, you know, Highland Park don't need anything like that. We have a spirit. We have a governed society that really seems like it doesn't even exist anymore. But we're going to bring that life back. And that's what Parker Pride Alumni Association is about.
Yeah, and that's why that event was so good. I mean, it was just a great event full of people who really want to rebuild the city. You know, the city deserves a school board. It deserves a school district. And I think Kevin Smith is doing a great job. I think he's there.
Who?
Kevin Smith, the manager of the school board.
Oh.
You know, he's
the
working hard.
Paying, over $250,000 to?
What's that?
They're paying this man a lot of money to be the school board over.
Yeah, the budget is it's $250,000 or so, and it's him, it's another person, it's a building, it's debt reduction, you know, that still sits on the school board. But I think that the main point, the thing that I learned was that without a tax base, you have to take the state money, right? So you either have $8,400 out of your own pocket per student to pay for the student, or you don't. And if you don't, then you have to take the state money. But you know, he wants to.
That's a lot of money to pay an individual for a broke down school system.
Well, you know, looking at education across the country, he's a professional. You know, and you got to pay him something that he's going to.
Tell the man his clothes.
Do it.
I know him personally.
Yeah.
Well, I would love to see. I remember the day when we even. My class, the class I sponsored, we give citywide. See, the city and the school were so closely connected, and we gave citywide carnivals. And it wasn't just the high school. We'd go around to the elementary schools and the middle schools, and we'd give out the flyers. Everyone participated. And with the band, homecoming, Highland Park would have their homecoming. The whole city come out.
And how important are these things? They're
critical.
They're
very critical. And I mean, in the car dealerships would give the convertibles, and you'd have the homecoming queen and court. All of that. I mean, it created a spirit. That's why, Robert, now the spirit of Highland Park and the alumni is still so strong.
It's very strong. There's thousands and thousands of alumni on Facebook. You know, we work pretty closely with the Highland Park Alumni Association and are giving them a part of the school to put in old yearbooks and awards and trophies, et cetera, because it's important that the community have access to the building, but not only that, a part of the building that's their own. You know, it's really the community's building.
Right.
I'm 51. I'm not living forever. You know, you own these wonderful things if you have the chance to, only for a time.
Right.
They really are something else, and you're either a curator and a custodian of it, or it slips through your hands. You know.
Right. Well, let me ask you, Ms. M, you have a lot of giant containers behind your building. What are they used for?
A lot of what components? Sorry.
Those yellow containers. That's like open cart.
Yeah, so there's a gentleman, his name is Angus Vale. He lives in New York City, and he's doing a project there, a temporary pop-up project of a container globe. So if you Google container globe Shakespeare, you'll find it. And basically it's a collection of shipping containers that's made into an old globe-style theater that Shakespeare
that's what I was
had.
thinking.
And it's an incredible project, and so he wants to build a prototype there, show it to people, and then find a place to permanently put it in the region. And we're trying to convince him that Highland Park is the best place to do it, because it's really a program that involves kids. You know, it partners with community groups, and it's just a great project. And it's also, I think, a good fundraising site. But it's a beautiful project.
I have to say, you're really invested in Highland Park. You're doing a lot, trying to stay focused and keep things moving instead of just coming in, doing what a lot of people come in, rape the city, and then leave. You're
Yes.
saying, you're involved. People
Yeah.
see you, they can touch and talk to you. I
Yeah,
like that.
we've
I
moved
like
here.
that about you.
We've left New York City entirely. We don't live in New York. We don't have a venue there. We're here.
Well, I'd like to talk about that theater, the big theater, auditorium.
I have to
We
go,
call-
Miss Perryman. I got to go to work.
All right. Thank you, Sydney.
Thank you.
Thank you for
Uh-huh.
calling.
Bye-bye. Bye, Miss Perryman.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
That theater or auditorium is a nice auditorium. I feel that once, that gets revamped, that could be rented out for different things all the
Yes.
time. Everybody's always looking for a theater
They
to.
are. Yeah, it's a very important community assembly spot, right?
Right.
It's about 400 seats. We don't use it. We build our own theater with our lake, and
Right,
our islands
right,
on
right.
the lake and our mezzanine around, et cetera. And that we see as a community assembly point. It's something that we want the community to use. We don't program into that kind of venue.
Right.
So cinema could be in there, et cetera.
Yeah,
But it's
so-
really a spot for, when the mayor needs to talk to 400 people, it's a great spot to put everyone. And-
Well, back in the Sure Enough day, not only did we hold plays there, we showed films
Right.
every month. I mean, it was just such a great place for the students. After school, they pay $1 and they'd see a movie.
Really?
And
Wow.
yeah,
I didn't know that.
Yeah, we'd let down that asbestos curtain, and it was wide like a panoramic screen, and it was just a great auditorium. We filled that auditorium. We showed we had the projector up on the balcony, and we'd show the movies.
There's so much history in that building.
There's
It's
so
just
much.
The stories are endless. We found some files in there. Maybe 4 months ago, I was shown them that are teachers from 1918, 1919,
gosh.
1920. Pictures of them, their resumes. We want to find a home for this sort of thing. I mean, we can certainly house it in the building, but it needs to be rescued, right? It needs to be looked at,
rescued,
cleaned up,
archived, and so forth,
It's
because
amazing.
people would love to see that.
Yeah.
Highland Park was a premier district.
a magnet, as the caller Sydney was talking about. It was a magnet for students to come to this district and to this city, and it was a magnet. It started the middle class. I mean, there's no end to the stories of how
The
vital and
$5 a
important-
day
Yeah.
thing. And also, okay, here we had the block from Second to Third.
Yeah.
And me walking in that building as a young student teacher, I said, I've never been in a building that big.
Right, yeah.
I mean, as far as a school. And it had the college and the high school. Everybody had their own part, but we kind of ate collectively in the cafeteria. It was just a wonderful community. It was a community. We have another call. Good morning.
Yes, good morning. I'll be honest, I'm not impressed with this gentleman and his friends from New York coming into Highland Park, collecting our spoils and trying to make little artifacts out of them. It reminds me of Europeans going over to Africa and stealing their treasures and all of that kind of stuff.
Well, listen to
Watch
this.
out, Highland Park. They've done it. They've done it to great parts of Detroit, and they're ready to do it to Highland Park. I want Highland Park to have its own independence, to enrich its own black community, and we don't need white guys from New York coming in and showing us the way to go.
Well, let me just say this: Highland Park Community College and high school, it sat there abandoned, and no one wanted to
Yes,
do
they are.
anything. Wait just a minute. I know.
What do you mean no one wanted to do it?
Pardon me.
You said no one wanted to do it. That's how
I
you know
wanted
that
to
be
do it
true?
financially, raising money for it, and all of this. I've been a part of this community for a long, long
I have
time.
too.
People talked about it, but nobody did anything about it. And it's not about excluding black people or so forth.
Mm-hmm.
Remember, this district, the school is how old was?
1917. But,
Nin-
I would say to the caller, I'm a white guy, as you say, and I'm a they in your definition. But, there's going to be people moving into the city, and I think you're right to be nervous about who's coming, right? So, are these people going to contribute? Are they going to bring the arts? Are they going to join the school board if they can? Are they going to work in the political system, you know, you should be nervous. You should ask yourself who is coming, and you should ask them hard questions, and you should keep them to their promises. I think that's good. Because I'm white isn't a reason for exclusion. I don't think that's very fair. But I think you should be asking.
You to say.
Well,
did you say it's easy for me to say?
Yeah, that's easy for you to say. I mean, let me just cut through the chase. I'm a citizen of the world. I should be able to do and enjoy anything that the world and the ground offers. The problem is that there are systems and policies and countries that control the way the people live. And those are the things that I have a problem with. Not the earth. The earth is mine. But we got people who control things, and right now the ones who control it are people who look like you, who look like the white guy. Mm-hmm. Y'all Brenda just mentioned, nobody had the money as well as the ideals. Yeah, maybe so, maybe not. And the mayor and the city council, they weren't proactive enough either. They could have went and found some money from Washington or somewhere to restore Highland Park High School. I almost cried when I saw that high school just slowly have a slow death. And the politicians, the policymakers, they're the ones that's responsible. They always say, the people are supposed to be. But the policymakers that we put in there, they are the ones that are supposed to make things happen, and they don't. You know what I'm saying?
And that's
they wait for people with money like this gentleman or whoever else coming in and say we're going to do something, and they're always impressed by money and all of this kind of crap. But they have money to their disposal to being public service. They just don't know how to. They're either too lazy or they're unskilled in how to access that money that's already available to the federal government, states, and all these other places.
I think we're going to talk about that. I want to talk about that as far as the funding we were talking about. Thank you. Thanks so much for your call.
Thank you for calling.
Yeah, because let's talk about that federal funding and stuff. Why it's not here yet.
So funding in Highland Park is difficult. The city's frankly blacklisted from receiving a lot of the funding that you see happening in Detroit, happening in Midtown, happening in downtown. The city is not eligible for MEDC, Michigan Economic Development Corporation funding. The city has to complete a process called an RRC, which is Redevelopment Ready Communities program.
How does that happen?
I think it's a 12 or 14 step program where the city goes through a process where the mayor, the economic development person, someone from city council, and 2 community members are all trained in how the MEDC funding works, and then they are through that process re-eligible to receive the money. But that money is the gap money that everyone talks about. So if you try to get money from a bank to go to Highland Park, you're not going to get the loan, right, for a commercial property, because you can't get the rents that are going to service the debt. So you have to get this gap funding, which was utilized in downtown and midtown, and it's time for Highland Park to get its share.
Well, is
of the state
anyone
funding.
working on that?
The mayor's office and Mayor Yap and Teresa Johnson are working on that. We don't know when that'll be complete, but we can't pull a building permit and remain eligible for the Obsolete Property Rehabilitation Act and the Community Revitalization Plan money. And that's about 40% of a budget in this region. And if the market was there and if the rents supported it, we could invest our money and not need additional money and find bank financing. But there's no bank financing in Highland Park, and there's no state funding in Highland Park. The foundations don't really work in Highland Park. Kresge, Ford, they're not here. And we can help tip them and the state to be here.
Once this paperwork is done, and then do they have to defend the paperwork?
Yes. So it's a process to be reauthorized.
Right.
And they're making good progress, but we don't know when it'll be complete. So we continue working with the MEDC to be ready for when they come back. We want to be a project that's ready to go. And we're selling our building in Corktown, which is right across from the train station, in order to move that money here.
Right.
So we're ready. We've been willing to sell that building for a long time, but it really needs to find the state money at the same time, because we can't, we don't have the funding to fund all of it ourselves. So, to really have an impact,
Well, a
that
quick
funding needs to be there. But it also
Right.
doesn't just need to be there for us. It needs to be there for other projects in the city.
Absolutely.
The Woodward revitalization,
Yeah.
the TIF district, it's just above the Davison. All the projects and the opportunities in Highland Park will all benefit from that state funding. And once it re-enters the city, the MEDC wants to fund here. They want to be able to, because Woodward and Highland Park are important. And
they are
it's-
important in that Woodward corridor.
The corridor can't be ignored, and the state knows
No.
that, and the city sits really astride it, and the Davison. It's there's so much opportunity in Highland Park for community development. It's really a great city. Its small size is its huge advantage. You can have an
Right.
impact on one side, and the ripples go all the way to the other side.
It's funny. That's why I chose to teach here first, because I said, I can cut through a lot of the paperwork if I worked in a smaller district.
Right.
And so I received offers from Detroit and Highland Park like the same day, and I chose Highland Park, which I'm happy I did. But I love that whole complex that you guys have purchased, Highland Park College, and I always say the high school, but that whole one block area. And what are your plans for Ferris School?
For Fair School, we think of it as studios, artist studios,
Right.
entrepreneurial studios. There's a lot of young entrepreneurial artists and thinkers in Highland Park that need space.
Yes,
Yeah.
there are. Yeah, and the annex right behind the high school, there's that little annex.
Mhm.
What are you going to do
Is that
with
the Technical Arts building?
Yes.
Right. So our gallery will go on the ground floor.
Wow.
Other galleries in there, and then we'll see what the needs are. What is it that people need that space to be in terms of entrepreneurial work,
Well-
right? So think of seniors, think of programs, apprenticeships. There's a lot of things that can happen at all levels and all ages of the community.
Well, I think if dreams come true, that could be a one-of-a-kind space in not only the country, the world, because of it already has the foundation.
Mm-hmm.
And just being able to get the money, to get the funding, and so forth. People love the arts.
Yeah, and we don't take government funding once we're operating. We've never taken grants or government support to operate the venue.
Right.
We just do it on audience and tickets.
Now, people can look at your website. Would you tell them the
Yeah,
website?
it's GalapagosDetroit.com.
GALAPAGOS.
Yes, and then the word Detroit.com.
Detroit.
And there's a statement, what our values are, and there's a good photo tour of the sites. And there's a press that we've received. We've done pretty well in the past, and we're here to do that again with the fundraising component and the growth of young artists.
Well, Robert Elms, I'm so happy you came on
Thank you.
to give us the lowdown.
It was fun, and I'd love to come back. and
Oh,
talk more.
yeah. Well, I want to keep up with it. I have a vested interest, too. I just love this city. So thank you again.
Thank
And
you.
everyone, stay tuned for Table Talk. We'll be back in just a few moments.